Thanks, Justin. So, hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Harmon. I'm at Kenyatta College, which is in Redwood City or the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's part of a community college district, the San Mateo County Community College District. At Kenyatta College, I do a few things and we'll talk about that. But this talk specifically is going to be on the use of the Forge. So, focusing on the process, long form OER assessments using the Forge. And real quickly, just so everybody's aware of what we're going to talk about today. As Justin said, the nuts and bolts of creating it, I'll go more into that this afternoon, but I'm going to focus more on what this is, what this tool is, and why I personally think, and I'm hoping some others also feel the same way, that this is I would argue, a revolutionarily important tool as we go forward, both in terms of open pedagogy, in terms of creating authentic assessments, as well as just connecting with our students in ways that are truly substantial. So we're going to talk about who we are in this room for a minute, but mostly we're going to talk about what is the Forge, how are others using the Forge. I'm going to base it off of my own experiences, but I also am bringing in a little bit of a couple other presentations that I found very important, and I talked to folks about them as well. And then how can we use the Forge? And that will lead us to the afternoon session. So with that, as I said, I'm at Kenyatta College, which is part of the San Mateo County Community College District, and that's in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, basically halfway between San Francisco and San Jose. My primary role currently is as the OER and ZTC program manager. So I run the grants that we have for our zero textbook cost program, and I work with faculty on the conversion of their courses using various types of OER and other zero cost methods. I also, for a number of years, was adjunct faculty in Spanish. Once I got the program manager position, I had to let something go, and that was it. But I continue to teach linguistics. And in fact, that is where I have used the Forge in the past fall 2025. So we're going to do a little quick check-in, and I'm going to ask us to use the Mentimeter just because while I do like the poll function on AirMeet, Mentimeter has it a little bit nicer. I like that one a little bit better. So I'm just gonna move over a tab, and you're gonna see the same QR code. If you go into the resources tab on the right side, you will see both the slide deck link as well as the link to this Mentimeter. Ah, it says poll is closed. It shouldn't. Uh-oh, that's a problem. Is anybody else having that problem? Let me do this. Let me triple check and make sure everything. You think you have everything set up, and then oh, there we go. All right, let's do that. No, there we go. Okay, refresh, start over. Let's try again. Now it should be enabled. Try now. There we go. Okay, I'm starting to see. Okay, so the first question really is just who's in the room, just kind of gauging who's in the room. And as I said, I have at least two different hats. I actually have more than that, but still. I have an administrator hat, but I also have a faculty hat. So you can choose more than one if you are in multiple roles. And by the way, I did put in student because some folks actively take classes, even though you are also either working at a college or whatnot. So go ahead and check on in. I'll give you a minute or so to do that. Not surprisingly, most folks in here are faculty, but we do have some staff. We do have some administrators. No students yet. Interesting. Okay. That's interesting. It wasn't quite letting. Let's do this. Let's do that. Okay. All right. So you should be seeing now the Mentimeter. Okay. So we got quite a few folks in here. You got a thumbs up. Librarian is, so for the community colleges in California, librarians are also faculty. So that's why I did not separate out types of faculty. I just said faculty as a whole. So that's if you are a librarian, you're probably faculty. I know there are some, in some systems, librarians are considered staff. So whichever is your flavor, shall we say, go for it. Okay, I'm going to go to the second question because I really want folks to think about this one. I want you to think about a skill that you have learned how to do. Now, this could be anything from cooking, riding a bike, uh, uh, creating something artistically like painting or drawing or something like that. It could be crafting of some kind, literally any kind of skill. Enter a single word to describe what it took to get decently good and then even master that skill. And please put in just a single word, but you can do this more than once. So feel free to put in a couple different skills. Wow, I love the initial word cloud that we're getting. This is great. Awesome. Okay. So in case you aren't aware, the way the word clouds work, the bigger the word is in the word cloud, the more it's being put in. Notice that practice is probably still the biggest word. Um, the linguist in me wants to call it a lexicon, but I'm trying to be more colloquial here. Repetition, patience, persistence, time, focus, dedication. I love the fact that those are coming up as the biggest ones, but I also love the smaller words, meaning that maybe they're only being put in once or twice. Challenge, hyper focus, mistakes, ganas. For those that don't speak Spanish, ganas are kind of like, I call it kind of like motivation, but really it's a little bit more than that. In Spanish, you say, um, tengo ganas de something. And what you're saying is I have the ganas, I have like the motivation, but it's like every cell of your body wants to do that. Or more importantly, when you say no tengo ganas de, and then whatever verb, what you're saying is literally, not only do I not have the motivation to do it, every cell of my body does not want to do this. So I love that who was that? Beatriz, you put in ganas. Yeah, I totally get that. Rest, corrections, attention. Gosh, I love this. Praxis coming up pretty big too. Feedback, love this. Okay. We could go on and on and on, but we have to talk about this. So I'm gonna leave this open. If you still have some words that are still coming to mind, go ahead and put them in. I'm going to leave it open. I'm not going to end it. I'm just going to go on to my presentation. So with that, what is the forge? Okay, so let's talk about this. It was built originally to be called antecedent by Raymond Oenbring, who is a professor of English and linguistics at the University of Bahamas. When he created antecedent, it was all about trying to reward students for their effort to go in and rework and rework and rework a composition of some kind or an assignment of some kind. The problem is, and we'll come back to this in a second, how do you do that in a way that you can actually measure? And before you say revision history on a Word doc or a Google doc, we'll come back to why that's faulty. But that isn't going to be the greatest of answers. So he came up with something called antecedent. He talked to Delmar Larson. And so Delmar took on antecedent, and it's essentially now the forge. There's very little different from the original to the Forge, just some modernization and some of the tools that have come on with LibreText. But essentially, it is designed to support writing. It does have other features, but of the four tools, the most robust one is the writing tool, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But in all of the tools that the Forge holds, It really is meant to showcase the students' effort, both to us as the professors, as well as to the students. Because the great part about the Forge, and I'll come back to this, is that you can show the analytics to the students. So they know how much time they have spent in that document, how many times they have gone into that document, what they have done in that document. Or, and I'm saying document, but like I said, there's other tools in there. It is done in a way that is not based on surveillance, which I think is crucial. So many of us have used honor lock or Proctorio or all of these types of, realistically, they are all surveillance tools to try to authenticate that a student is actually doing their own work. But it comes with a lot of security issues. While they are FERPA protected for now, they are also very hackable. There's just a lot of issues with so many of those tools, not least of which is the general privacy element of students feeling comfortable showing who and where they are. What is really important about the Forge is it's not surveillance in that sense. It does track activity, but it is not a camera or in a microphone trying to grab a bunch of information. It is simply just the movements within the document. There is no data with respect to the student data. There's none of that data is sold. There's no external AI database submission. So you are not trying, you and your students, I should say, are not feeding into larger issues. And it is self-hosted within the LibreNet ecosphere. It is it is built into Adapt, which means it's already FERPA compliant. It is also GDPR compliant. It has a number of protections for all users, whether you're student side or faculty side. As I said, the writer is the main tool that most people are probably going to use, regardless of discipline, might I add. There is also a spreadsheet function. It's called Calc. Impress is the PowerPoint like analog, it's for presentations, and then to do vector graphics, you have Draw. It is based off of LibreOffice. Delmar is usually quick to point out that has nothing to do with LibreText or LibreNet, but it does look very much, I would say, closer to Microsoft Office products than it does Google Office products, Google Suite, I should say. And that's important because when we get to student comments that I'll come back to soon, one of the comments my students had was, well, it doesn't look like Google Docs. I said, no, it looks like Word. So we'll come back to that. It is by far and away, I would say the writer is the most robust tool. The calc definitely is also pretty robust as well, though. So if you are someone who uses a number of spreadsheets with student submissions and student work, calc is a really strong option too. When students log in, and when I say log in, it is through Adapt, and I'll show you some screenshots of that in a second. But more to the point, when they get to the proper Forge element of this, this is what they initially see when they go to an assignment. They'll see if there's a number of drafts. They'll see if, there's due dates, etc. They'll see all these different pieces, and then they hit the start button, and then they go into the doc or the spreadsheet, whatever they're using. When they're writing, as you can see, this is LibreOffice. It looks very much like the Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office. In fact, it includes some of the same color schemes, which I think is funny. But more to the point is that students will see things fairly straightforwardly. If they're more used to using Google Docs, yes, there's a bit of a learning curve as far as remembering what tools are under which tab and that kind of thing. But realistically, this looks very similar to Word. And as somebody who's a power user of Word and a power user of Excel, I've used both the Writer and Calc, and it feels very, very analogous. It's pretty much the same. When you are reviewing student submissions, again, you have a very, very similar setup with respect to the document itself and how that document element is laid in. But what you also see, and I hope you can see my pointer, but up above the student submission, what you see is like a mini timeline. And that shows you, again, the number of submissions that the student put in, the number of drafts, whether there's comments. You have a navigation bar over here on the left. That is your set of tools and analytics. And we're going to look at a lot of these analytics in a second. The effort and revision grades are a little bit clunky. I will be brutally honest with this, but what are really, really important are the other ones. The time metrics, we're going to go into that one. Analytics and rewind essay, by far and away, those are the most powerful tools. And I would argue they're some of the tools that would potentially convince you more than anything else to consider using the Forge in your courses. And then feedback, which is really great. You can directly add feedback into this setup. You can do it through comments, like margin comments, like you would in Word. And the great part is students not only see the comments, they can respond to the comments, just like in a Word document or a Google Doc where one person puts a comment and then there's a reply and you can go back and forth. It's really great. So let's talk about those analytics. As I said, they are, can the tools be combined to create documents with figures? Great question, Chris. You can insert images into the writer just like you would a Word doc or a Google Doc. So absolutely, you can do that part. Whether you can do something, let's say in Draw, and then bring it into Writer or Calc, I don't know. I've never tested that out. And if somebody wants to go test that out, go and go. Not now. Watch the rest of the presentation, but certainly go try for it. I have not tried it before. Anyway, the really awesome analytics, and this was Raymond Oenbring's idea, was how do we measure the effort of our students? Because we want our students, whether they're writing something or they're putting together a spreadsheet or what have you, we want to see the iteration. We want to see them get better. We don't want them to be perfect, because that makes us question as to whether the student is doing the work themselves or whether they're in the right level of course or not, right? I don't know about you, but um, uh, I don't know about you, but when I see somebody's work that is a little too good, it's not just whether they did the work or not. It's, why are you in my class? If you're giving me a paper that's actually better than what I can put together or any of my colleagues in my discipline, why? Like, why are you in my class? You should be teaching this instead of taking the class, right? At any rate, so these next few slides really showcase the power of iterative writing process, going in, having drafts, revising, and showing our students the power and the importance of this as well. So the EssayMap is one of the most powerful analytic tools that is part of the Forge. It has 3 different main colors: green, blue, and red, meaning when you see this initial box, right? If you see green circles, those are pieces that have been pasted in. If you see red circles, these are things that have been deleted. And then blue is anything that has been revised, okay? And so you see the y-axis, the x-axis, and actually the x-axis is on the top instead of the bottom. But the idea is you kind of start, let's say the start of the essay is up here in the top left corner, and as you read the graph, you should be going in a diagonal line down from the top left to the bottom right. Ideally, a good attempt, shall we say, in massive air quotes, means that there's multiple diagonal blue lines, and those lines are really just small circles, right? That, yes, there could be some pasting, like say of a bibliography or of a quote from something that the student is trying to insert. yes, there should be some deletion, but primarily you should see a graph that kind of looks like this. Lots of diagonal-ish blue lines and dots, little bit of pasting maybe at the end, like a bibliography, and goes along those lines. What you don't want to see is something like this. And I will completely shout out Tara Bunyag, who's at Modesto Junior College. She and I both did presentations on the Forge at the most recent online teaching conference a couple weeks ago. We were different sessions, and in many ways, my session led into hers, and she had way better graphics on this than mine. So I asked if I could use them, and she said yes. And thank you, Tara. So this is an example of a probably, and we always have to stress this, a poorly written assignment with a lot of copied material. Why do I say that? Well, what you see is one diagonal blue line and then a second, and that's it. That's all you see. You really only see two insertions, right? That's massaged text or edited text, revisions, right? You see a couple of green circles, and they're fairly sizable. They're not little tiny ones. They're medium to large. You don't see any deletion. And what isn't shown here but would be shown maybe on the time metrics is the student probably did not spend a whole lot of time writing this. So this shows that there's very little iterative work, meaning the student did not go in and hone this essay very much. Wrote something, dropped in a few pieces, maybe wrote a little bit more, boom, done. And so why don't we want that? Well, because what we want is our students to go in and rework and edit and refine. And what this is saying is that the student did not do that. Compare this to something that's better. And why is this better? Because you're like, oh my God, that's a lot of red lines, lots of deletion. Well, yes, but look at how many blue lines are also in there too. This student didn't go in twice into this essay, went in several times, at least 5 or 6 times, deleted quite a bit, worked things around, moved things. You see this kind of almost brownish color. That's a copy and or a paste and a deletion at the same time. So the student went in and worked on this essay. Was it a perfect essay? Probably not. But they at least went in and worked on it, and you could see the process. Think back to some of those keywords that we talked about, right? What were some of those keywords? Repetition, practice, patience, persistence. That's what we want, right? That's what we want our students to show. So this graph in many ways shows some of this. Let me show you one more this was also from Tara's. And this is another example where you see, again, multiple blue lines kind of going in. Lots of pasting, but also deletion. So this student is going in, is really working, is connecting dots and then reworking everything to make things fit better. So when it comes to this set of, I'm going to go back a couple, right? This was the poorly written one. This is the one that does not have very much work being done in this essay. Versus this one has quite a bit more work. And this one, maybe even more. And you see how you can start showing students, look, I know how much work you're putting into this because this is the work you're doing. Now, the caveat is really important. Students must do 100% of the work in the Forge, or that way, depending on which side I'm on. You have to have them do 100% of the work in the Forge. And when they don't, you have to do something to showcase that, nope, that's not what I asked you to do. You have to do 100% of the work in the Forge so that I can see how you got to where you are. When you do that, and the conversations I had with my students showed this, when I showed them that this is why I want to see 100% of your work in the Forge, I don't care that you're more comfortable in Google Docs or Word. you need to be here, and this is why. This is just another tool. I will show you how to use it, but you need to be here so that I can see your work. When I explained that to them, they understood that, oh, what I'm looking for is not perfection, meaning I don't want a perfect essay. What I want is your revisions to show that you are mastering the material. Justin, I see you on screen, so I'm wondering if there's a question.
We have a few questions in the Q&A, so I was
Okay,
waiting for a little break, and I'll just bring them up
sure.
in the order of upvotes. So
So have there been any issues with work not being saved? And certainly that is a concern, Dana, I would agree. To my knowledge, no. Although the caveat that I will put in is it the Forge, because it's measuring the active writing time and the kind of what it calls thinking time, which is like the pause time that a person is doing. If you are paused for too long, it will tell you to refresh your screen. Now, most everything will come back. There might be a couple of like a sentence that wasn't fully saved, but no, usually autosave works pretty well. There's, just like in Word, there's a little button. In fact, let me go back to that slide really quick. Sorry for the scroll of death, as it were, but there's a little save icon up there. There's ways to save within the document. So the student, as long as there's, just like we always teach them, right? Click save repeatedly. And as long as they do that, things should go pretty well. Can groups of students work on a document? Chris, that's a great question. I don't know the answer because I don't do group work, generally speaking, in Forge. I
right
have
now
heard.
it's something that's on the horizon but not implemented yet because the Forge is within Adapt. Adapt doesn't really do group work yet either, but it is something we know people would like to see, and Sarah hasn't mentioned, but the goal is to make the Forge work for not just word processor documents, but also like PowerPoint slides. And we would had a lot of people who would love to have group work for building a PowerPoint, right? So if you're going to build a presentation as a group, it'd be nice to see who contributed what and who edited, or if they went and looked at things. So short answer is no. Long answer is we want it to, and we're working on it. Let me bring up another one.
Mm-hmm. Will we know, but do we know if it will count towards the regular and substantive feedback legal requirements? Can this be tracked through Canvas? Allison, that's a great question. And for those that are not in the California Community College district or system, regular and substantive interaction, or RSI, is the measure by which our distance education modalities need to show as far as whether the faculty and the students are interacting with each other on a regular basis in meaningful ways. I guess that's the quick definition of it. And my college recently went through accreditation. Or through core inquiries, I should say, or through the initial review process. The full process will finish in the fall. But our fall courses were part of the initial RSI review, and it is anything on Adapt, because it is an external tool, as it were. It is something that we do have to factor into with respect to these audits. Now, saying that, what our recommendation was to faculty using any kind of external tool, and we did have courses that were using Adapt be part of that initial evaluation, was that there were explanations and, let's say, screenshots showing regular and substantive interaction, so that conversation piece. I will also say that, generally speaking, for Adapt, what we recommend at Kenyatta and what I would recommend in general is that while the rubric in Adapt is good, it does not have the granular level that, say, Canvas or Blackboard have. So because of that, what I will do is I'll do my initial points in the rubric in Adapt, but then use the Canvas rubric that I created that is much more robust and has way more explanations. I will use that as well. And it's just using 2 screens so that I can make sure that my totals are correct and the same, and just give all of my detail there. When we did that, we got 0 core inquiries, so we got 0 dings, as it were. And I really want to stress that is the case. Remember, anything Adapt is an external tool. So as long as you document as the instructor, as long as you document what you have done, you're fine.
I think this one might be more for me.
I think.
I noticed there's a cost to students. Can you explain the pricing structure and how students pay or register? There is a cost. Essentially, the only things that we charge for anything at LibreText are things that scale pretty quickly and take up server space. And secure student FERPA secure data is expensive for us to maintain. So anytime you're recording student data, that is some sort of a cost that is beyond what we can do just through our sustainability model. Right now, the cost for the Forge is $15 per student, and that is a subscription model regardless of the number of classes. So it only costs us money to save a student's secure data. It doesn't cost us money to have them in 5 different classes, right? Because the classes are not secure data. I mean, the students' data in those classes are, but it's not like that's 5 different students. That's still one student with 5 different courses. So if you're at a school who would like to use the Forge in their English class, their music class, and their biology laboratory, that is not 15, 15, 15. It's not 45. It is just 15 total for that semester. So it's a 6-month subscription, and that's purchased either through a bookstore coupon code that we have, like a kind of like how you get any online access code, or they can buy them directly from our store on our website. If you're a LibreNet institution, then we do have the bundle discount to which is $15 for all of Adapt and Jupyter and Forge for $15. Otherwise, they're $15 each. Obviously, you need to have at least access to Adapt to use the Forge, so it's kind of a bundle already. But we're hoping with the Department of Education grant that we put in and with some working with some other institutions, we can try to make that cost as low as possible moving forward. Great. I'm gonna do. We have a number of questions, Sarah. So if we want to save some for the end, we can. If you'd like.
I was gonna say, let's take this one and then go back. Yeah. Writing on their phones, is it mobile friendly? Just like everything else in Adapt, it is fairly mobile friendly. Although, yes, of course, we always tell our students stop writing on your phones. We know that this is always going to be a challenge. It's a challenge for Google Docs, by the way, and for Word, right? Like this is not always, this thing is not the most easiest thing to write on, but certainly it can work. Absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and I want to show a couple more of the analytics that are really great. And Tara was also making some comments, answering some of those questions in the chat, and I agree. This one is the other one that I adore, which is Rewind. So remember I said earlier that using Google Docs or Word is problematic with respect to the revision history. The reason it's problematic is that both Word and Google Docs, the revision history is a huge chunk of time. It does not actually give you anything granular as to what was done. It also is often a just large scale concept, meaning it's just showing you what got changed. It didn't show you how it got changed. Rewind is completely different. First of all, 30-second intervals. So you literally, again, I hope you can see my cursor. You see at the top basically a playback bar, and you can play back from the time that the student started the writing process all the way in 30-second increments. And that's really important because in those 30-second increments, it's using a color coding to show you what was new text that was typed in, what was edited, and what was deleted. So you can actually see how your students worked on the assignment. And yes, you can fast forward it. I usually put it at 4 times speed so I can kind of watch everything go. This is really great, especially for drafts, so that you can see where a student has come in on the next draft and reworked it, and then come into the next draft and rework it, and on and on and on. I think this is one of the key analytics, this and the EssayMap. I really like them both. And this is something that you cannot get at this level from the other two uh, Word or Google Docs. You just can't do it at this level. There also is a WordChange timeline, which shows you the rate of change over things. This can be very useful, especially for, I find, longer assignments, like multi-page assignments, where you can see where there's very little change, like on this, because you only see basically one spike. There's a little bit of a smaller spike here, but essentially there's not much change. So this is showing lower effort, poor effort, compared to this graph, which shows multiple spikes in lots of directions, high frequency of them, not just that there's many spikes, but that there's short intervals between those spikes. So again, you're seeing that the student is putting much more effort into that work. Practice, patience, dedication, iteration. Again, going back to these concepts. As I said, most of these tools are very robust in the writer for the essays, but you can use the other tools as well, and they do have a lot of these aspects, especially Calc. Calc has quite a few, and this is what it looks like. As you see, it kind of looks like Excel. You have Impress, which is for slide decks. Again, kind of looks like PowerPoint. And then vector graphics are put together on Draw. Draw, I believe, is the least robust out of the 4, but certainly all of these tools are constantly being refined, and more analytic components are being added to them. I also really like this. Now, I did not use this in the fall because it wasn't fully available in fall 2025, but it is something that I do plan on using in the future. And these are human validation questions. Again, this was Raymond Oenbring coming to this with the concept of, I want to make sure that my students are doing the work, not a bot, not an LLM that is trying to do the work for them. So you can set up human validation questions. You can make it so that these are things that would have only happened if you teach a hybrid course or a face-to-face course. Maybe it's something you said on a specific day, or maybe it's something that's in the textbook, or something, some kind of question that would show that it would have to have been your student who would know that answer, not an LLM. And I think this is really a great idea to, again, not have surveillance in the Big Brother sense, but make sure that the students are really the ones doing the work. I really like this tool, and it is something that I do plan on using in the future. So that's the Forge, right? Now, I focused a lot more on the writer than the other tools, but how is this being used? And this is really the great thing. So again, remember, Raymond Oenbring is a professor of English, especially composition, and linguistics. And so clearly, humanities, social sciences, we do a ton of writing. We're going to be using, this is a really great tool for it. However, I would strongly argue that this is a great tool regardless of discipline. I know Delmar's using this, and a few other folks are using this in the STEM fields with their lab reports. Christina Moon, who's professor of Spanish over at Chabot College, which is also in the East Bay, and one of my writing colleagues, she's using this for the weekly journal for her students in her Spanish classes. You can do multiple drafts. You can do lots of different things. You can use this in so many different ways. And again, yes, the writing side is the most robust of the 4 tools, but all of them encourage this concept of open pedagogy, the fact that you can have students work on something. One of the ideas I have for the next iteration of my intro to linguistics course is I always like offering up an extra credit assignment. I don't do much extra credit, but you got to really earn it. And one of the ways that I do extra credit is if I want to revisit one of the chapters in my OER, I heavily adapted um, Catherine Anderson's Essentials of Linguistics for my OER text, and I've added a number of my own slides and lessons in there. Well, I'm always trying to tweak it. And so I ask my students, if you want some extra credit, help me rewrite this. These are the things I think are clunky and I don't really like them. What do you think about these other areas? And because of that feedback, I'm able to rework some of these pieces. Or they give me ideas for new lessons that I put in as optional lessons. One of them a few years ago was um, a student and I forget which parent was from which one, but one parent was from Morocco, the other one was from Palestine, meaning two totally different versions of Arabic. And why is it that they're called dialects, but we see the same setup for the Romance languages and they're called different languages? Why do we have this difference in terminology? And that spawned a whole discussion. And I, at that time, only had Google Docs to be able to have this. I will now be using the Forge for that kind of an assignment. So being able to use this for open pedagogy. The other piece that I really love about the Forge is that it really hones in on competency-based grading and assessments, mastery-based grading assessments. Again, this concept that we want our students to practice repeatedly, to hone, to because this is how we learn, right? This is how we learn. So if that's the case, giving them a tool that encourages them, rewards them for doing that kind of work is so crucial. Um, and I think those of us that are involved with competency-based grading and mastery-based assessments, the Forge lends us to this perfectly. There's peer review editing right now, and as Justin said earlier, this is going to be even more robust coming in the future. And realistically, like I said, this is why I started using it in the fall 2025. I was one of the early testers under the Forge branding of it. And at that time, it was not in Adapt. It is now folded into Adapt, so it's a lot easier. And my biggest reason for wanting to do this was I hate Turnitin. I hate Turnitin. I will be open and honest in saying this. And all the other programs that are like that. I wanted to be able to showcase the students' effort, and I wanted to be able to show them and allow them to see the effort as well. And so when Delmar had told me about Antecedent being brought in and rebranded as the Forge, I said, "Ooh, can I play with this and can I try?" And so I was in there. So, of course, like every good research-minded person, what did I do? I did an end of semester survey. I did other surveys too, but the end of the semester surveys were pretty interesting. And again, this was before the Forge was brought into Adapt, so students were having to do an external link, but regardless. So one of the major issues I brought up earlier, the Forge times out, it makes me reload. And I said, well, yeah, it does that, and this is why. It's because it's tracking your activity, it's tracking your active writing time versus your passive time. By the way, I giggled when so I ran the survey, I gave a presentation and a video where I gave my responses to these questions and then got feedback afterwards from my students. And a number of students said, wait, it's tracking my activity. I don't want that. And I said, folks, do you have one of these things, these smartphones? Do you have a computer? Think about that statement and come back to me. And when I showed them the difference of this tracking versus, say, Proctorio, honor lock, blah, turn it in, blah, 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 they understood. They were like, oh, okay, this is just tracking my keystrokes, essentially, and my mouse movements, not anything else. Lag issues. There were lag issues earlier in fall 2025. They have since improved. I did notice that, but it really wasn't that bad. I think really what it is that with Google Docs especially, but even Microsoft Word online in your browser, you don't notice the lag. The lag is there, by the way, but you just don't notice it. There's a lot less of it. The Forge has now improved in this area, so that's important to note. The students said, "Oh, editing is a hassle. We can't find the tools." And I said, "Well, that's because you're used to Google Docs. This is actually set up very similarly and very, very similarly to Word. You got to learn the tool. It's not that hard to learn. You can do this, and we have resources in our learning center and other places to go find things." Again, they brought up the, well, you can use the revision history in Google Docs and Word. Why not use that? And that's when I explained to them the 30-second intervals and everything. I will tell you that the response when I said, "Hey, no, I can't do the same thing. This actually is better for you, and this is why." My students came back and said, "Oh, you're making sure that we're doing the work. Got it now." I showed them, I explained this the whole way through too, but that's okay. Um, this one made me laugh the most, and I'll tell you why. And Mac users, Apple users, I'm going to apologize ahead of time because it's you guys. Forge doesn't work well in my browser. Well, here's the problem. It's Safari. You can't use Safari or Opera for that matter. It's Safari and Opera. You cannot use them for darn near anything. Absolutely, it works beautifully in Chrome, in Firefox. PC users, I use it in Edge. It works just fine, but that's because it's running Chromium as a backbone, so it's going to work just fine. It's just Safari. Just stop using Safari. I know Mac users. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. So some suggestions, and then hopefully that's enough time for questions, although I'm happy to answer more questions too. Um, some of the lessons I have learned, plus when I've talked to others who have used Adapt, yes, setting it up in the Forge, setting the Forge up in Adapt is going to be the way to do it. You can do it externally, but having it within Adapt means that you're using the infrastructure of Adapt, and it just makes things a lot more seamless. It's a lot easier for students as well as instructors. Whenever possible, have a template set up, which is a great idea. And in the afternoon session, I will talk more about that. But having like a Word doc, or preferably, I think you can do Google Doc too, I'm not sure. But a Word doc where you set up a template for your students for whatever the assignment is, this helps them. Again, tapping into universal design for learning, right? Set things up because you want to make sure that everybody understands what needs to happen. Rubrics. I know not everybody likes using rubrics. I'm going to be the plug and say, look, I didn't used to like them either, and then started learning about all these different elements, including competency-based grading practices. Having a rubric is key, and including certain metrics into those. So in my rubrics for Forge assignments, I say you must have a certain amount, whatever the expectation is, this amount of active writing time and this amount of passive or thinking time. And I allow my students to see the analytics always. So they know, they're able to see whether, how much time they have on both of those metrics. I tell them I expect a minimum number of entries into the assignment and some kind of editing work. I have it as part of my rubric, and depending on the assignment, depends on how I do it. I'm happy to share those later. But having that in the rubric does a huge thing. It makes it so that when I grade, yes, I can point to those analytics, but then it's built into it. So if you get a student that has put for a 4-page essay, has written actively for 10 minutes, plopped 3 or 4 pieces in and called it a day, even if that writing is very good, I have a mechanism to be able to grade down and say, look, you did not show that you mastered this work. You showed that you plopped stuff in. You did not show that you revised it, you reworked it, you thought about it, you struggled with it, and you learned from it. And because of that, I can put this in my rubric, and if a student has questions about it, they have the rubric and they have the metrics. They can see everything. Again, allow your students to see the analytics, make comments in the Forge, and again, the students will comment back, and I love that. I didn't even tell my students to comment on my comments, right? To reply to the comments in the Forge. They just did it. And it was great conversations, and it helped them write better for their term project, which is ultimately what we want, right? Like any kind of new tech, and I say new tech in the sense that not new to you, new to the students, right? Having an early tester assignment just for students to get the feel of it, a zero stakes or low stakes assignment, I think is a great idea. I did not do that in the fall. I should have. And I certainly will do it going forward. And then, of course, as always, allow grace periods when possible, right? Things happen. It's technology. Things happen. So how can we best use the Forge? I'm going to go into this more in the afternoon, but again, it's part of Adapt. So you go and you click the rocket ship will take you everywhere, and you go into Adapt, and then you can pull. There's already some Forge assignments in there, but what we're going to do this afternoon is I'm going to walk you through how to do it on your own, because honestly, I think for most people, that's going to be it's not to say that's going to be the easier way to do it. What is probably better stated is you have your essay assignments or your spreadsheet assignments, whatever, and they're not going to be quite like anybody else's. They're going to be yours, and you're going to want to tweak them. So we'll walk through some of these as well. So, all right, with that, it's about 4-ish minutes for Q&A.